Okay, so hello, my name is Rene, and I would like to start with a little story, as PowerPoint is telling you. Um, Once upon a time, about 20 years ago, there was a 8-year-old kid living in a Dutch village full of, what do you think? Exactly, chickens. So that was me, as Arnoud already knew. Um, just telling you a bit more about how I grew up. On one side, I was obviously super privileged. I mean, I was born in the Netherlands, which already is super privileged, and then I grew up with money and food and clothes and education and infrastructure and chicken and healthcare, everything, right? That was great about the way I was born and grew up. What was not so great about it is that I grew up in an environment where I didn't really feel home, right? Which was very religious, sect. Don't have to talk too much about it. We can later if you want to, but I wasn't very happy either in my family situation, so to say, because of that, and also not really in my, let's say, school friends situation, because I was the typical fat nerdy kid that got bullied in school, so to say. It wasn't a very happy time back then. As you can see, I'm now very happy. So I'm happy to talk about it and share about it. But so I want to take you to a specific situation that happened around that time. It was a very hot summer day, even hotter than it is nowadays. What happened is that I had my summer holiday, which was about 6 weeks. And so what my father would do with especially his sons, he would take them all over the country to go to, let's say, book markets, right? So you would have these booksellers in in basically somewhere in the country, and they would, have all these stalls with all the religious books that were all, belong to our sect, so to say. And they were like amazing, like beautiful looking books, right? Because it's like from the 1600s and they are the Perkament old everything. So it looked great. The content wasn't that great. But yeah, so we were dragged all across the country to those situations. And I remember exactly the day when something happened, because it was at one of those book markets in my dark homemade clothes. And what happened is, so I'm scrolling through titles in across these books in the wooden boxes and the paper boxes, and I see this one title that really stands out to me, right? And it's this title, and it was this book, right? Which is no. So it was this book. Uh, how to win friends and influence people, written by Dale Carnegie, a huge bestseller, like one of the best-selling books after the Bible, basically. It was immensely popular, and so I saw it immediately, wanted to buy it because I was obviously very motivated to do these things in life. And so I bought it. We went home, immediately read it, was completely addicted to it, read it many times. And actually, it's basically a book full of very simple tips, and I recommend you to read it because it's actually a lot of fun, and it actually works very well what's in there. And I started applying different things in there. So there were really simple things that as a young child you could already do, right? So like use the name of the other person more often, right? Super simple things that immediately would work, right? So I got fascinated by that, and that basically brought me on the journey of becoming not just assuming like, okay, social skills belong to a certain group of people and non-social skills belong to another group of people, but actually this is something you can learn, right? So that brought me on the path to learn more about humans, why people do what they do, and how you can influence their behavior, which is still one of my favorite topics, basically. So where this journey brought me is to a lot more happiness, a lot of great relationships in and outside of work. So I'm very happy that I was on that path. And so if you compare that 20-year-old story and situation to my situation right now, I think in my mind, there are two reasons why this happened. And the two reasons are, first of all, motivation. I was obviously very motivated to change things, right, and to build relationships. And then the second thing is that I got kind of handed and then started to find more and more tools and techniques and theories on how to move that motivation into the right behavior to actually achieve that what you are motivated to achieve, right? So that is the goal for this class, to first of all motivate you to build better business relationships. And I know that I can't just give you my motivation, it has to come from inside, but at least I want to spark it a little bit. And then next to that is obviously to give you a bit of questions you can ask yourself, techniques you can use to actually build better business relationships. So what I want to start with is a small exercise for all of you. You've all brought something to write or type on, and write down a couple of reasons for yourself in terms of, so why do you want to build better business relationships, and be very specific in what it is you want to achieve and why that is important to you. Well, I think it's very important for you all to make it as concrete as possible, right? So that means you start with, what is my end goal, right? And sometimes this end goal can be very big, like I want to sign $500,000 in revenue, or I want to grow $500,000 revenue to 600,000 in revenue, right? Or it can also be very small. I want them to place a freaking tracking pixel in their website. Doesn't really matter. And then think about, okay, what's the behavior that they need to show to get that done, what I want to achieve, right? And then think about, so what's then the behavior I need to show to get them to do that, right? So it's pretty complex. So that's unique, and that's why it's so important to make it very concrete. Every time you have a goal, no matter how big or small, define the goal, think about the behavior you want them to show, and then think about what behavior you want to show and should show in order to get them there. Okay? And that's going to be sometimes very short term, sometimes it's going to be very long term. The bigger the goal, usually the more long term your behavior and the expected time to value basically is. Okay? So I think it's very good to realize very concretely almost everything in life, especially in business, we want to achieve is not connected to our behavior directly, right? We cannot achieve it alone. We can only achieve it if others do those things that we want them to do. It's super important to realize, right? So it's, you all probably know this thing, right? So what you know, but right. But then I would like to add something to that. It's also who knows you and how they perceive you, right? Because we all know, let's say, Trump, right? They don't know us, right? So that's not going to lead to anything, right? We can't get him to give us a green pass from the US or something because he doesn't know us, right? And even if he knows, he doesn't perceive us as a person he should do that with, right? So these are next steps you need to take, right? So first of all, do I know the right person to achieve my business goal? Does that person know me? And then how do they perceive me, right? Because only if they perceive you in the right way, they are gonna be willing to show the right behavior in order to achieve those goals that you have for yourself. So we're doing a class for a reason, right? And that is because building a relationship is actually pretty hard. And there's a lot of reasons why it's hard, and these reasons are typically pretty intimate, or you know, you have to really open up and be vulnerable and dig down into your insecurities, etc., to find out why it's hard for you specifically to do that. So again, same exercise, write down what the reasons are for you to build amazing business relationships. All right. So thank you for sharing. I think so. This is a very important thing, I think, to evaluate for yourself all the time, right? Because we kind of intuitively feel when we shy away from doing the thing that actually would potentially bring the most amazing results in our life. And I think it's important to realize why that happens and to find our own patterns, basically, and the most important reasons for us, and to try to tackle those. So a couple of reasons that I wrote down have to do obviously with the things that were touched upon. So we'll just go through them quickly, right? So one of the things is that we are risk averse, right? And basically every time we take action, it means we do not take all the other actions we could take, right? So we fool ourselves all the time into being busy and feeling kind of good about ourselves because we are doing something, right? But we do not confront ourselves with what would actually be the best thing that I could do right now, right? That would advance me most, but also has the highest risk usually attached to it, right? So, simple example, when I would now tell all of you go out with one of our customers, you would all pick one that you have a great relationship with, right? Which is ridiculous. I'm not saying you shouldn't, but I'm saying that what would advance you most is to build one with those that you have the least relationship with, right? Until they're going to kill you during dinner or something, but you get the point, right? So try to constantly focus on where is my relationship, and we will talk about how you can kind of identify and measure that in a bit, and defining what are the actions that I should take, why am I hesitant to take them, and let's just go for it. Because one thing that is very important to understand is that if you do not take the right behavior, what you are afraid of is happening already, right? The fear of rejection, for example, if you don't act, you're rejected anyway, right? If you do try to engage with a person, you might still get rejected, but you could also win, right? So if you do the right behavior often enough, and you are okay with being rejected from time to time, you win. Versus always sitting in your own home and never being rejected actively, but actually you are being rejected all the time because you don't win. Another thing that has to do a lot with that, obviously, is being vulnerable, right? Choosing to share the real me or you in this case, right? So it's hard for ourselves to believe that another person is going to like us and is going to be into us, so to say, into who we really are. And every great relationship consists of two people who are doing that exactly, right? And I think the concept of making sure that people either hate or love you is an easy help in this one, right? So you should realize that whenever you achieve something with people, they really love you, right? It's never that there's a person that is kind of has an okay relationship with everybody is really doing very well, right? The people that are doing very well have haters and lovers, right? So that's what you should go for. You should say, I'm going to put myself out there. Because of that, a lot of people might hate me. Some are going to really love me. And because of that, I'm going to achieve my goals. Because these people are going to take that behavior that is needed to achieve my goals, right? I think Maya, for example, has really shown a lot of improvement in the past few weeks on doing exactly this, right? So great job. Another one is that we don't believe we are worth it. So that's the value part that we just talked about. And this happens a lot, right? Especially if we see another person on a different level in our imagination than ourselves, right? And because of that, we simply don't even try. So a lot of people, for example, when I talk with them about the two mentors I have, right? They say, how did you get in touch with these people? Why do they want to spend time with you, right? Well, because I tried, right? And they are actually people that do see in some way some value into conversating with me. And because of that, I now have a growing business relationship with them, right? So again, understanding that you right now might believe that you don't have enough value, but at the same time understanding that you only have to bring a small amount of value for a person to want to interact with you, right? Because if you can advance them in one part of their life, career, work, whatever it is, you're already a very valuable person to talk to and spend time with, right? Another thing is, and I think this happens a lot in sales, customer success, service areas, etc., but also marketing and business development for sure, is that in a relationship you have to lead, right? If you want a relationship to go somewhere, you have to take proactive actions, and they have to be the right actions as well. But very often we don't know how to lead a person that we perceive as higher or more powerful than us, and thus we go into this servant mode, right? Like, oh, we're just going to try to accommodate you, and I hope you will like me for that, right? That's not going to bring you anywhere, right? So you should be like, I'm going to do the right things. Either they're going to hate me or love me for it, but at least this gives me the chance to take this somewhere, right? And another one, I think this is a very important one, is that we actually want to, but we simply don't know how to, right? So for example, if Arnold says, I don't know how to build a personal relationship with some people because I don't have it, well, there are techniques that you can use to still build it. And I'm not saying that every business relationship comes as natural as the other one, but there's always something to bond over. And sometimes that can be purely business, that's also fine. But you actually build a personal relationship over that what you share in the business area, which is also cool, right? So try not to think about it as a static thing, right? So don't think, oh, I can't do this, I have no ability to do that. No, there are techniques to do it. You can learn them. I believe that everybody in the world could be much more successful and happy by learning the techniques, learning more about humans, learning more about what behavior you can display to let them display the behavior you need. So again, like also with the past point, try to constantly evaluate why you are not showing the right behavior and what you are going to do about it, right? Because if you don't do anything about it, you're losing anyway. If you do something about it, you might win. So, next question is, what defines a great relationship? How can I easily find out how great my relationship with a person is? Because very often we say, oh yeah, we have such a great relationship, but we can't really. So what is the behavior that you and the other person are really showing in a relationship that shows that a relationship is great, right? So anybody wants to shout out something? When do you know you have a great business relationship with a person? What is happening? What behavior are they showing?
Pick up the phone when you call.
Right, very good.
I think for me it's also, let's say I have a call with a customer and I'm telling them that this weekend I'm going to go to a specific event, and then I have a call with them Tuesday next week, and the first thing they say is like, oh, how was this event? Like they remember that you told them something,
Right.
And they are like interested in knowing how it was. And
They know stuff about you, they're interested in it, they're following up on it.
they trust you.
Yeah, they share.
Yeah, they trust you by sharing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they trust you, and that is seen, that you can see that because they share with you, right? So those are two different things you have to realize. So what that person trusts me. Well, you don't know that.
Yeah.
They share with you, and because of that you know that they trust you, right? So it's very important to look at the actual behavior you are showing and people are showing, right? Being motivated to do something or thinking about somebody that they are perceiving something about you or whatever, that doesn't work. You need to look at what behavior am I showing, what behavior is the other person showing.
And also, it's also results, so, and fairness, so that they are actually doing their side of things and you're doing your side of things.
Yeah, there's a balance, right? You're both trying to get somewhere. Yeah. Anything else? So obviously I've thought very long and hard about this many times and also this week, and I have basically create a list of behaviors, right? And some of these behaviors will come back in that list, but I want to start by kind of trying to summarize it. And this, I think, if you ask yourself this kind of question about the relationship, you can already, and this is less about the behavior, so it's less concrete, but I think you can, in your own head, already know where this is actually heading, right? So, are you both really trying to let each other win, right? And do you both feel like your success partly depends on the other person? Okay? So that means you are helping the other person, right? They feel like their success is partly depending on you. That person is helping you, and your success is partly depending on them. If this is not the case, it's not a great business relationship, right? Because there's this disbalance, there's no motivation that keeps the relationship going and helps you both forward, right? So I think this is a, well, it would be weird to say that this is good because I made it up myself, but I think this is a good way to help you evaluate quickly. Okay, this person that I'm now going to meet, is that a person that we really try to help each other forward, or is there some disbalance in there?
By business relationship, do you only mean with external?
No, it can be your colleagues, it can be your managers, can be your vendors, can be your partners, your customers, potential customers, anybody.
I feel like that all my success depends on Geert.
Does his success depend on you?
I have no idea. Shoot.
Maybe you should ask.
I don't think so.
Right?
Because otherwise there's no success, right? If you don't have success with your customers, then there's still truth others.
But that's why I said partly depends, right? If it entirely depends, might be a bit too much. Then, so behavior and things you can really recognize, and this was I think already mentioned by you guys, is how much do you know on a personal and business level about each other, right? This is pretty simple to figure out. So what you can do to encourage this, obviously, is sharing and asking them to share. Pretty simple, right? But so much overlooked, so to say. Another thing about trust is, would this person tell you if they are changing jobs, right? So if, for example, somebody you think is very important for your success is suddenly sharing with you, hey, I'm leaving a job, that's very different than when they share with you, hey, I'm thinking about leaving my job, right? Because that means that they think you are an important person to them, that they share this personal journey with.
Yeah, this is more.
Great, right? So that's a good sign, and the same goes for other situation, like a huge problem that the person is encountering in their personal life, like for example, a person that shares that their kid or their wife or whatever is dying or ill or whatever. That's a major thing to share with you, right? That shows a lot about the intimacy of the relationship and the willingness to share with you, and also the other way around. You have to realize you will only get back what you put in there, right? So if you don't share your doubts and your problems and your interests and your passions with the other, it probably won't come back to you either. Another one that is always a bit funny to me is, would a person let you know something that favors you, but not necessarily them or their business, right? So it goes into the sphere where people really want you to succeed, right? So I have one example where Dirk and I were in a meeting with a potential customer, and I'm not going to say the name because it's on video. What happened is we were talking about pricing, and this person tells us how we should kind of position our pricing to make more money, right? How is that really helping their business? Yeah, it's hard, right? But this person really wants us to succeed, and obviously sees the value we can bring to them and their business whatsoever, right? So that's a great sign. Is this person introducing you to others, right? Very easy thing. Has this person ever introduced you to people that were more important to them, close friends to them, people they value around them, right? That's a very clear sign if you have a great relationship with them and about how they are perceiving you, right? So one of the examples we had this call with a large executive search firm this week, and that's because I met a person at a conference, had a conversation with her. She's a person that advises companies on what technology they should be using, and she said, I never introduce vendors randomly to anybody, but I have this great relationship with this person within this firm, and I really think that he would like this, so I'm going to introduce you, right? So that shows that this relationship is going somewhere, right? So if you never get a referral or never get access to colleagues to talk to, if they really want to control everything themselves in the sales process versus allowing you to talk to other stakeholders, that's a problem. Honesty, very important, right? Because if you believe that you are really going to help each other forward, right? You never lie, because that would end that, right? So if you ever lie to another person, you have to realize you're now doing something very short term. You're going for a very short term result or perception or whatever, and ultimately this is going to bite you in the back. And the other way around as well, if a person does that to you, that's simply not going anywhere. That's going to be massively successful. Another one is the way you share, well, first of all, if you share doubts and failures, right? So if you're in a collaboration or in a sales trajectory or in whatever it may be with somebody or a customer or a partner, are you talking about what could go wrong, right? Or what the other person is insecure about? If you don't do that, there's not this intensive level of, okay, we're trying to get there, let's just face the facts, what it is like, and talk about the real stuff here, right? And so if you try to package everything, right, in like, oh, we're just gonna, you know, stay on the surface, so to say, and don't really have intense conversations about things that are, let's say, more vulnerable and more risky, then that's also a clear sign that things are not moving forward. Another one is to what extent you are afraid of talking to the other person. And this is a funny one, because if you are super afraid of talking to another person, that's obviously a bad sign, right? Because that means you're afraid of that person, you think about a certain way about how the person perceives you, or you are afraid that you're not delivering value, can have a lot of reasons. If you are not afraid at all of talking to that person, that's also a problem, right? Because that person is apparently not challenging you on anything, right? They're just, you know, you can throw them around, but then how is that person ever going to make you massively more successful, right? So you have to be kind of in the middle, or let's say 30% on the scarcity level, so to say, right? And the other way as well, if this person is afraid to talk to you, like I just said, that's a terrible sign. That's not going anywhere. But again, if they're like too comfortable talking to you, it means that you're not challenging them on anything. You're not cashing in on the credits that you are building with them, right? So they should always be kind of on their toes when they're talking with you. And you can also evaluate your friendships actually on this. Your best friendships, you're always a bit afraid because you know they know you and they're going to point you at your behavior and all those kind of things. But those are, to me, you know, the friendships that are driving you both forward and that are the best. Another one is what channel of communication you typically use, right? So you just talked about a person picking up the phone. That's a pretty great communication channel if you look at the entire stack of tools that you basically have to your availability. So think about it as, so what is the greatest communication tool that you can use to have a conversation? Exactly. Right? Physically. So if you think you have an amazing relationship with a person that you have never met, think again. Right? That is, to a certain level, you can have a great relationship. You can actually get people to do the things that you want to, but it is to a certain extent. Right? Then how often do you use email or versus the phone to convince a person of something, or try to convince them of something, or to give them feedback on something, etc. Right? So the way you deliver and the risk you are taking basically by using a certain communication method tells a lot. But it also tells a lot about the effect and the chance that this relationship is going to go somewhere and is going to be successful. Right? So think every time, what tool is a tool that I am like because you're risk averse, so you're always trying to use a communication tool that's easier to use for you, but it's probably going to be less effective. Try what tool can I actually use that's going to either make this happen or not happen, right? Because that's much better. Another one, how fast does a person pick up to the phone, respond to your messages, all those things. Very simple. If you are annoyed by how fast a person is responding to your messages, that's a clear sign that you know, your relationship is not that great. And the other way around, obviously. This one, to what extent is another person desperate to spend time with you? If they have a major business issue that's in relationship to what we do as a business or you are trying to do with them, right? Are they, putting you around the table, or do you get informed later, right? About what decisions have been made. So this is a very important one. To what extent do these persons perceive you as the person to talk to when something is happening, they have a problem, a question, need something, want to go somewhere? So try to evaluate your relationships not in an emotional manner, but in a rational manner, especially in a business setting, by using this kind of questions, right? What is the behavior people are showing? What is the behavior I am showing? Second of all, but mostly what are they showing? And based on that, evaluate where your relationship stands and evaluate what you should do in order to make it better. Right? So I would suggest that we take a small break because now we're going to go into the more practical part of this, which is what are the techniques that you can use to build better relationships, and we're going to do some work around that together as well. Okay? So now I'm going to walk you through a range of things that you can think about, start doing to try to build better relationships. And what I would like you all to do is to make a list for yourself of the things that stand out to you. You're like, okay, this is something I would like to apply that's going to make me much more successful, right? This is going to help me achieve my goals, build better relationships, and thus achieve more success. Okay? So I've tried, because there's a lot of things, so I've tried to categorize them in 3 categories. The first one, how to think, right? So that's much more inside yourself, right? So how you need to perceive yourself, first of all, and can think of your own value and those kind of things. The second thing is how you need to be, so how you need to be perceived by others. And then the third thing is about the behavior you can really, so really the actions you can take to be perceived like that. All right? So try for yourself in each category to find the things that you would most want to work on and can really help you forward. Right, so one of the things in terms of how to think is to always think in such a way that it's all about them. And this is the most lame thing to say to me, because everybody says this all the time, but nobody really does this, right? I don't do it. This is so hard to do. So what I mean by this is that everything you say to another person, every touch point you have with that other person, right? You always do it from their perspective. So you can imagine if you really do this, it's very intense. It's super hard, right? Because it's so much easier to think from your own perspective and say the things you want to say in the way you want to say it, right? Via the channel that you like to use, right? But so if you think about the other person, you have to constantly translate that into what behavior you should be showing. But like we discussed before, right? It's not, oh, I'm going to show certain behavior and something is happening. No, I have to understand what type of behavior is, gonna help the other person to act the way I want them to act to achieve my goal, right? So this is vital. If you don't do this, you don't get anywhere, right? Just to give you a simple example, you can give 20 demos to 20 potential very interesting customers that would definitely benefit from our product, right? But if you don't tailor-make it to their situation, their business, their issues, where they are going, they're not going to buy it, right? And this is a very simple example. So this is also on a personal and a business level, of course. And this is very much connected to that, right? So step into the shoes of the other person. Not literally, but this is really what you should try to envision. I know that there's actually one company where in each meeting they have kind of like a teddy bear or something sitting in a chair to represent the customer, right? And this is a reminder to do this. Okay, so to constantly think, how do we position ourselves? What do we say? How do we price? How do we send an invoice? How do we communicate? That is tailored to this customer or this persona, and when you talk about personal relationships, to this individual.
Actually, even Indeed has it. Like I think in the US they have an orange chair which represents the candidate,
There you
which
go.
always is on the head of table in the team.
Yeah. Another thing that you need to do is, so if you decide that you would like to build an amazing relationship with a person, you need to fully accept them for who they are, right? Every person has things that might annoy you or whatever, right? But if you're gonna really go intense with a person, you're gonna have to get over that, right? So there's this Netflix movie and there's this quote that everybody now sharing. I think it's something like, you like a person because of who they are, and you love a person despite of who they are, right? So an intense business relationship is very much connected to that concept, right? You just accept people for who they are, and you start, you know, navigating around it or using it, or you must start making fun about it together, which is a very good thing to do, because then a relationship is really intimate if you are making fun about each other's behavior and tics and whatever. So that's an important thing to think about. Then take risk, right? So this is something we've talked about a lot already, very much connected to vulnerability, where very often what we try to do is we try to wait and wait and wait until the point where we are 100% sure that something is going to happen if we do it, right? But that simply is not a way to live your life, because that is not going to advance you as much as when you take multiple risks all the time and win and lose some, right? So it's a very good attitude to have, where you, at some point where you understand, okay, if I take calculated risks, I accept that I will lose some, but I also know that I'm going to win some. It's much better than constantly waiting. And this has to do a lot with what I told you earlier as well. If you do not take the right actions, it's going to go down and south and that and whatever anyway. So better to take a risk and try to make something out of it, or not. But then you know, okay, now I'm not going to focus on this relationship anymore. But just don't fool yourself. Another thing I think a lot of people do is they start with a negative view on people. And I think that shapes your behavior. And because of that, limits you in how far and you can bring a relationship and what you can get out of it and how intimate it can be. So I would suggest that you start by trusting everybody. And then when things go south, or you get any contradicting signal, so to say, then you decide, okay, I need to change my view. But don't start from negative, because it's very hard to build up to positive. Again, this is a much more risky option to take in life, but again, it will have much higher outcome. Make sense? Another one that we do is we very often show behavior because we want now the other person to do something, right? And when we talk about major successes and really being successful, we usually don't see that happening overnight, right? So that means we need to start thinking more long term. And the way to do that is very simple, right? So you start thinking, okay, what is my goal, right? How likely is it that I can get this person to help me achieve this goal now? Quite unlikely, but is there a chance that it can happen? Yes, okay. So what is it that I can do now? What is the value? How can I now advance this person, right? So they can advance me later, right? I think it's a very important thing to do. So usually what we do, for example, in the sales trajectory is the same thing. Like, okay, person says, we're ready to buy in 9 months. Okay, we say, thanks. And 9 months later, we pick up the phone. What did we do in the meantime to build a business relationship with this person in order to make the chances of closing that customer much higher? Nothing, right? That's ridiculous. In those months, we had all the chance to give them value, which would make it inevitable not to give some value to you in 9 months, right? So that's the way to think about it. Another one, and this is one of the favorite concepts in let's say, behavioral economics, is incentives, right? So if you think about any behavior that a human can show, right? There's always a reason for the behavior, right? Nobody does anything. We're super lazy if you think about it. We're so lazy. We only do things because it can help us, right? Which means, and help us is another word for there's an incentive, right? We can gain something because we show certain behavior. So if you are in the business of making other people do stuff that you want them to do in order to succeed, which we all are, we have to always give them an incentive, right? So we usually, what we do is when we are ready to ask a person to do something, which might even be after this brilliant building up the relationship, at that point, we ask them to do the thing. But we do not give them an immediate reason why that is going to benefit them. That's a mistake, right? So every time you ask a person to do something, you have to express literally how that is going to advance them. Okay? And how it's going to advance them can be in different ways. So it can be economic, can be social, and it can be moral. Economic is very simple. You're going to make more money, or you can be able to buy water or shower yourself, those kind of things, right? Social is about being liked, right? So you can motivate people to do a thing that will not give them any economic value, but will make them more liked by others. And that's what the weird thing about people is. We do a lot of stuff because, you know, it will make us look better and be more liked, be liked more by other people. So that's the social incentive. And then the moral incentive is it's the right thing to do, right? This is the one that happens at least in business, except if you are very perceptive. So if I am giving a person a lot of value, right, then I ask them to do something. How does it feel for them not to do it? It feels wrong. Because I gave them so much, now they feel like they're obliged to do the thing I'm asked to do, right? So if you're very smart, you build up so much credit that they even have a moral incentive not to do it. If you're really smart, you play around with these and you actually find out for each business relationship that you're building, which incentives they are most, let's say, sensitive to, right? So a marketing manager might be more maybe social, the CEO of recommendation might be more economic, you know, just play with these concepts and understand thus how you need to frame your message. Another one that I think is more related to when you have a pretty good relationship already is that actually the volume of touch points can go down, right? Because there is less need, so to say, from both parties to have this constant bevestiging, validation is the right word, right? About the relationship, that it's going well, that we and because there's so much trust that we can leave each other alone forever, right? Which you also see in personal relationships. But the touch point that you have to be even better, right? So that's a good thing to think about. If you have a great relationship, what you should do, you should decrease the amount of touch points you have, because it's just economically stupid to have a lot of touch points if the relationship is already at kind of like its highest level, right? But when you do have a touch point, you need to make it very great, right? So with people that I have long-standing relationships with in the business, I just go out for dinner twice with them a year, and they're really, and I give them all my attention, and it keeps going from there, and I keep gaining out of that relationship. It sounds a bit creepy, but that's the way it works, right? And then that means I have much more time to, you know, more intensively work on business relationships that are more young or are less developed. Another one, and this is, I think, a very, very important one, is before you go into any interaction, you should understand that you are a person of value to the other person. Because if you do not believe in this, the other person is going to feel this, and your action is not going to yield any result. Okay? So this, and so this is why I categorize the things as well, right? So before you do anything, first of all, you need to have the right mindset, so to say, in order to act the right way later. So now we go into the next category, which is how to be, right? So we can go through these pretty quickly because I think they're very clear, and but I think it's important for yourself to constantly understand, I need to be perceived as a certain person, right? And to achieve that, I need to act in a certain way, which we'll get into later, right? So the first one is being honest, right? There's no amazing relationship that is not based on trust, honesty, openness, all those kind of things. Another one is vulnerable. I think we've talked about this as well, right? So to what extent are you sharing doubts, problems, fears, etc. with each other, right? If you are not doing that to the other person, that other person is not going to do that with you, and this is not going anywhere. Being intense. Also, what a lot of people do, right, is they divide their attention over too many people, too many relationships, and they try to juggle all the balls all the time, but none of the relationship is really going to go somewhere. A clear example is that of a salesperson, and I'm just using the sales example a lot because that is kind of my domain, is the person that has 50 potential customers that all are in a sales trajectory, right? But with none of them, they're really building up this intense business relationship that will actually yield that huge result they are looking for, right? So they feel good about themselves because they're so busy, right? But they're actually not showing the right behavior in order to get to the results they want to get to. Another one is being kind, and I think everybody understands this, but I think it's very important that you show empathy. This is one of my learning points for a long time already, right? To show empathy to people, that you feel for them, that you're interested in them, because that you are kind doesn't mean that you're perceived as kind necessarily, right? So especially with new relationships that you are building, you have to ask yourself, what is the behavior I am showing to be perceived as the person I actually am, right? Because those are two different things, and we need to understand that we need to find the techniques to bring across that perception and level it with who we really are. Another one is upfront, right? So, and I think this is something that Arnoud also talked about, right? Not being a softie, in his words, right? So, are you comfortable challenging people with hard questions, hard facts, hard feedback, etc.? And the other way around as well. But this is more about ourselves, right? So, are you capable of doing that, right? Are you comfortable doing that? Because if not, you're not an interesting person for another business person to interact with forever, right? Because everything is on the surface, you're not going there where you need to go. Another one is highly energetic and passionate, right? So every time you have a touch point, what you need to do is you need to pour all your energy and passion into that one touch point and then take a break, okay? So you need to make sure that you can channel your energy, so to say, at the right times. And for me, this has always been a challenge as well, right? So how do I make sure that I can have multiple highly engaging conversations with people that are hard to build a relationship with, right? So that is by really preparing yourself, getting yourself in the right mode, then blasting it all out, then taking your time again to recharge, and then doing it again. Instead of going like halfway power all day long forever for 80 hours a week. Because again, that doesn't yield results. Focusing, putting everything in that focus, that's going to get you somewhere. This is one that we also talked about earlier. This is connected to the moral incentive, right? So if you are consistently so great and bring so much value to another person, that at the time that you ask them to do something that will benefit you, right, it's inevitable for that person to do that. that's the situation you want to be in, right? And then you can say, okay, is this manipulation? Well, I'm saying this is how humans work, so better make use of it, right? And as long as you have the right intentions and don't manipulate people into situations where they lose, right? But you help each other forward, I think this is the right thing to do. Okay, so after how to think and how we want to be perceived, so how we want to be, we are going to look into some practical things in terms of how you can act, right? So what is the behavior you can show in order to be perceived as the way you want, in order to build that great relationship, in order to achieve those successes you want to achieve, okay? So in business, we need to realize that we cannot just be perceived as a super friendly, nice person to hang out with, okay? Because for people that are also very ambitious, at some point it ends, right? They're not going to pour a lot of energy into a relationship that is only nice and fun, okay? So we need to be perceived as a person that can bring value, and that is typically a person that's interesting and knowledgeable, right? So one of the techniques you can use to do this, even if you feel insecure about really knowing a lot about it, right, about what they're saying or doing, it's actually pretty simple. So whenever a person says something to you, you try first of the simplest thing to do is to relate it to something in their setting. So to give you a very simple example, let's say the CEO of a recruitment agency says, well, I have this one recruiter who makes only one placement a month. I don't really know what to do with him or her. Okay. How can you now come across as more interesting and knowledgeable people? Saying, okay, so that means he does only half, or she does only half of what the other people do, right? So that means you understand the situation, the problem, right? So simply relating it to some other piece of knowledge you have in that setting alone is already creating that perception. Okay, let's take it one level outside, right? Then you're going to do it where you say, okay, this is your setting, and I know a similar setting, right? So you can say, actually, we had this other customer that also had this problem. This is what they did. They fired a guy. Okay, right? It doesn't matter all of this. You simply understand, help them understand that you understand them, right? Then another thing you can do is to not just go inside or similar situation, but you really take it to, let's say, a macro, I think you call this officially, level, right? So when, for example, marketing manager of recruitment says the CPC is really going up, right, for my sales jobs, you say, well, that is because the economy is really growing and the labor market is changing like this, blah, blah, right? So you can really relate it to what is happening in the world, right? So relating is a great technique for other people to understand that you understand them and that you are interesting and thus an interesting and knowledgeable person to interact with. Another one, I think we talked about this a bit earlier as well, is to show the real you, right? And this again has to do a lot with risk and the fear of being rejected and all that. Just have to realize that there are almost no great business relationships with people that don't know about each other's weirdnesses and passions and hobbies and whatever, right? Think about any great business relationship you have where that is not the case. It's very hard, I think. So just realize that in order to succeed, you have to do this. Yes, you will sometimes fail, but at least you have a chance again to win. Another one is storytelling. So this is something that I'm gonna try to do more and more also when I do speaking or when I want to bring something across. I think for marketing this is obviously something great, but actually for everybody this is great, right? Because a story is what draws people in, right? And I think this is a very important technique to use. So that's why I started the story today with the story about the chickens and all that, right? But because it immediately creates this emotional connection with another person. And storytelling is a technique in itself. There's a lot of elements that you can learn about storytelling. One of them is that you give people details so they can really visualize and feel the situation. So when I say hot summer day, wearing dark clothes, paper crates of books, that draws you more into the story than when I just describe a situation in general. So try when you do storytelling to really describe one situation very specifically, right? Because then people are really into it. Another one is to level, right? We talked about this earlier a bit as well. I want to put it in here as well, which is if you hold back, you have to realize you're putting yourself into a lower position than the other person, right? You're trying to serve them. That is not a great business relationship that is going forward. You have to say the things that need to be said, right? You have to bring the hard facts, the hard feedback, the hard questions onto the table, physically preferably. That is where a great relationship is built. The other way around is obviously bossing, but that's a whole different story. But that's also something you want to avoid, obviously, right? You don't want to just tell people what to do and boss around, because that's no, it also doesn't work, unfortunately. No, so it simply doesn't work. But that's, I think, something we are challenged that is not really a problem of any people in this room. The other problem is much more there, right? We're afraid to confront people and what the result will be, but we simply have to face it. Another one is to create pleasant surprises, right? So, but I am sure there are a lot of touch points you can create that are pleasant surprises, right? So, for example, pleasant surprise my father got was that a prospect of hers actually pleasantly surprised her by sending a postcard from Portugal, right? When she was on holiday. Now, that is what I call a relationship, right?
Not a signed agreement?
Not a signed agreement, exactly. It was a bit disappointing, but still. No, so just think every time, so can I do something that they don't expect at a time they don't expect it, via a way they don't expect it, that is going to pleasantly surprise them, right? Because that shows so much attention and care and all that. Another one, very simple, but we often forget it, is to stay in touch, right? So we need to evaluate each business relationship, and we need to force ourselves to think about how often we at least should stay in touch with that person, not to maintain the relationship, but to grow it. Okay? So that means that you don't have a touch point because you want something now to happen or you have to tell them something. It's simply because in order to grow the relationship, you have to have interaction with the other person. Okay? So if a relationship is important to you, if it has a chance to make you massively successful, define for yourself how often am I going to interact with this person, in what manner, to make this relationship more successful, and thus increase the chance of reaping the rewards one day. A very simple thing I learned actually from Joanna last week is that if you meet a person, you shake their hand, right? And we obviously probably all of you know already that you need to look the other person in the eye to make a connection, right? So the way to do this is to actually try to figure out the color of the other person's eye. Okay? So you will actually feel that it's a different feeling. It's very interesting to use. Technique to use. So every time you meet a person or you leave a person and you give them a hand or whatever, try to figure out what is the color of their eye. Because it's a very much more intimate feeling than just gazing at their eye.
What do you mean intimate feeling? What do you mean?
It just connects. It's much more connection.
My eye color is black.
Yeah. You can't see my eyes.
Black as night.
What if you're in a country where everybody has the same eye color?
Doesn't matter. It's not about that. It's just looking at it like, oh, what is the color of that eye? Just assume you don't know it.
Okay.
It's not about finding out the eye color. It's just a technique you use. So looking at the eye like you want to figure out the color, that creates a certain connection. Yeah.
So like open the eyes.
Yeah. All right. This one I think we have already discussed, right? So meet up with people, please. And I think this happens not enough. I don't do it enough. Other people don't do it enough. We don't do it enough. doesn't matter how we put it, we have to freaking meet people physically, because it just, you know, like I said before, not physically meeting people just puts like a barrier on how far a relationship can go and how successful it can get, right? And also try to vary, right? So let people meet you in your business setting, meet them in their business setting, and meet them at fun places, restaurants, whatever it may be. Because by varying locations, you find out more about each other, your relationship gets more rounded, so to say, and more fun, more interesting. Something we have also already talked about, but again, this is so important for so many people, especially here in this business. We very often use the communication tool that is for us the easiest to just blast out the message we want to blast out. But that means we are focused on the message we are blasting out, not on the way we deliver it. And because of that, it's not impacting, right? So if you want to achieve a result, you have to think, how do I have to deliver the message that is going to yield that result? And that very often is connected to a meeting, having a call instead of an email, all those kind of things. Another one is the follow-up, right? This, of course, has also to do with staying in touch, but is a bit more concrete. If you promise something, deliver it, and deliver more than what the other person is expecting and you promised, right? This is actually not easy, because usually when we're in a conversation, we promise a lot, right? And then we're like, oh, I have so many things to do, right? And you don't, and also, right? So when a person is indicating things that are interest of them, we usually only give them the stuff that's going to help us achieve the things that are going to help us. But no, what we should do is deliver them the value right now that they need right now, because that's going to drive way more value for you in the long term. Okay, another one, biggest frustration of candidates, no updates during the recruitment process. They don't know where they're hanging. They're like in a black hole, right? That's the feeling. So every time you promise a person something, a person is expecting something, and you cannot deliver it at the time they expect it, you need to let them know, right? It feels so good when people update you without you having to chase them or be like, I don't know, right? Because if a person doesn't do that, what's my perception? I'm not important to that other person. F them, right? Simple. Have fun, right? Already talked a little bit about this, but you know, try to make fun about the other person. Try it, you know. And again, some people are gonna hate you, some people are gonna love you, but it's much better, right? Claudia did this this morning when we did the fake demo, and you said, I don't know if it, and I played the CEO of Top of Minds and said, I don't know if this is really on top of your mind, haha, right? So feels something lame, but it really creates much more of a personal connection, and either I can choose like, oh, that's a lame joke, or I can be like, haha, right? But at least it's going somewhere, and do something, you know, fun as well, right? Which can be having a drink together, right? So why not, you know, go out at 5 p.m. and have a drink and talk for 90% about stuff that's interesting to the other person, and then do your business, right? Another thing, and I see this as a huge issue within our own business, and I'm probably most guilty of this, is that we package everything in our own cool terms, and you know, everything is fuzzy and beautiful and in the cloud, right? So what we have to do is step into the shoes of the other person, ask ourselves, if they would say what we are now saying, how would they say it? That is the way you are going to say it, right? So very simple way to do this, for example, is to think about, okay, what is the position of this stakeholder? What is their situation, right? What is their background, whatever it is, and say, okay, these are words that are going to appeal, or subjects or terms that are going to appeal to this person in general, and then take and also words that I want to use to bring across my message, right? And then listen to how they use these words, right? What word they use for that word, so to say, and then start using those words, right? It's very powerful if you can do that, right? So if I say, get more value out of your database, or I say make more money by making more placements out of your database. It's a whole different thing. But, right, it's much more tangible, it's much more understandable, right? So simple, but every time we, you know, use all these business or tech or whatever terms. So let's try to keep it super simple and in the terminology that your persona or contact is used to. Another thing is pausing, right? Which I don't do enough because I like to go fast. So this is also something I have to work on, right? So once you deliver a message, it takes 3 seconds for that person to process that message. So when you are bringing across your core points that you have to decide up front or whenever in the conversation, to realize when I'm going to say that, I'm going to bring it with a lot of drama, then I'm going to stop for 3 seconds, blah blahing, and I'm going to let that sink in. Yeah, right?
And it actually doesn't feel weird. You just did it, and it really felt
But it's, and
natural.
so this is about the way you deliver. So if you deliver in a very flat line and you suddenly stop, that's ridiculous. But if you bring across a point, then give a pause. And sometimes actually what also helps is repeating the last words that you said. So you say more value out of your database, or sorry, more placements out of your database, more places out of your database. Wonderful, right? So to get an actual reaction in the brain and to let something really register in the brain, it takes time. And thus, you need to pause. Active listening is a skill that obviously, or hopefully you all know about, but I just want to touch upon it because to me, this has been the most powerful technique I've used in many years. So when I was 15 to 18, I worked in the call center, right? And this was the #1 technique I used to outperform all my colleagues with 100%, right? Because what I would do, so we would book MOT, right? So car check, so to say, for car dealers, right? So I would call a person and I would say, okay, hey, is this you? Yes, right? And then they would say, sorry, I'm mixing something up. My bad. So listening actively, I'll come back to the call center story later, okay? So if you want to listen actively, these are the things you need to do. You need to be still, right? So sit still. So you're not moving around or playing with a pen or whatever. You need to, if you want to come across as empathic, you need to tilt your head a little bit, not like this, but just like this, right? A little bit. Really makes a big change when you actually observe people listening to you and how it makes you feel. You need to nod, so not completely sit still like, you know, you're dead, but just nod a little bit, right? Which means you're actively listening, as the word says. Repeat.
Nice.
And and that includes using the words of the other person, right? Or summarizing, those kind of things. And asking questions. And with asking questions, I don't mean saying, hey, what's your favorite color? And then they say red. And you're like, okay, what's your favorite movie? Right? That's a conversation that always sucks. This happens in dating all the time as well, right? So what you should do is you say, what's your favorite color? They say red. Okay. Why is that your favorite color? Well, because it makes me think of strawberries. Oh, why do you like strawberries? Or what is the memory that you connect to strawberries, right? Because we already, as humans, especially in the business setting, in the Western world, we have found out that often people ask questions to fake interest, right? But if I ask you a question about the answer you give, and then again, and again, and again, then it's very hard for the other person to think I'm still faking interest, okay? So you need to ask questions about what they are saying, not switching subjects all the time.
So how do you detect somebody who tries to fake interest and somebody who's actually interested?
So if a person just hops from topic to topic, right? That usually just means, so if you say something, so you're like, my sister is really ill, and they just hop to another topic, right? They're not really interested in you, right?
Or not in the illness of your sister.
Which is the same thing. Another one, which to me is a whole new thing to learn, is touching, right? which in a business setting is pretty, especially for guys, but probably for everybody, is really sensitive subject at the moment. But it is very powerful. A lot of connection that you can make with a person is based on sound, but a lot of it is based on touch. So I will give you 2 things that you can do with regards to touch that are very safe, so to say, to do, right? So one of the things that
Coming from the CEO. Another hashtag meeting.
yeah. So one of the things you can do, so if you could give another person a hand, right, which is a totally okay thing to do in business, right, you also use your other hand, right? So you
very African.
and close the other hand as well, right? So there's basically double the feeling. It's a whole new experience, and usually when a person does it, you feel like so, there's much more connection, unless there's something you really don't like. You're like, fuck.
Like a sweaty end.
Yeah, right? So that's one very simple thing you can do. Then the other thing you can do, so this between the elbow and the shoulder is the most safe area to touch, right? And then try not to touch the skin, but the fabric, if people have it. And that's impossible because it's across that point. So it has to be between here and here. So like you give a hand, you can also do this, or you just, those kind of touches, and it creates a lot of emotion and connection. So now everybody's going to be weird for the next few days. Like.
Yes.
Another technique that is very simple but very underestimated is using contrast, right? So when I say, actually you used something yesterday, which was pretty good, also using numbers, for example. But you said, for example, the number of qualified applicants from Hayes since they started collaborating with us went up with 50%, right? So that already, by using numbers, you're already making it much more tangible and powerful. What you could have said is they used to have 2,000 and it went up with 50% to 3,000 per month, right? Then it's even more powerful. So using contrast, dark, light, night, day, whatever it is, every time you explain the value of something that you're trying to do, you should say it goes from here to there, so A to B, right? So using contrast is very powerful because that makes the message much more tangible and thus more impactful. Asking the hard questions, again, we talked about this. We don't do this often enough. I don't do it often enough because it is a thing you so easily avoid, right? Because it is so confronting. It is so risky in your mind to do this. But it is necessary, right? So asking a hard question can be something like, how likely is it that we will be collaborating next year, right? Who asked that question? How likely is it that we are going to collaborate, right? Nobody asked those questions, and that is very much focused on our own situation, so to say. Another one that you can do actually to hard questions to really make the relationship interesting is hard questions that challenge the other person. It doesn't have to be related to what you are doing or what your business is doing, but so you can say like, how do you think with those developments going on, you're going to compete versus those and those businesses and not go bankrupt, right? That's a tough question. You're really putting the other person a bit off balance, right? This is necessary. You need to break stuff in order to get somewhere. Another thing we don't do, because we assume all the time, is asking for the right behavior, right? So we assume all the time that people will show the right behavior, right? Because we're talking about the same thing, right? Well, no. You have to be very clear in what the action is that you expect, and you have to both agree that that party is going to take that action, right? And it feels always a bit childish to do this, right? But it is actually very, very powerful, right? Very often we simply assume, don't do that, ask for what you want, and combine it, of course, with the incentive that we talked about previously. Another one, and this is basically connected to proactive being proactive, yeah, is taking action without being asked, right? And answering questions that are not being asked, right? So this is also much harder to do, right? So when we are in a reactive servant mode, we do what we are asked to do, right? But that is not getting us anywhere. So what we need to do is we need to think, right? We need to think, okay, if we want to get this relationship somewhere, or this collaboration, or what it may be, right? What are the actions that we can take, right? That the other person is not asking us for, but are going to help them, right? And ultimately are going to help us, right? So for example, in the sales trajectory, from now on, we're going to say, what if we do a workshop with your consultants, right? Which is taking an action without being asked for it, but actually it's going to help them and it's going to help you, right? It's a very simple example, just to make it a bit more concrete. Answering questions that are not being asked is also very important. Whenever you're in a business setting, right? And things are presented like numbers or prices or those kind of things, or expectations or deadlines, etc. There's always hard questions. The elephants in the room are not being asked. If you do not address them, it's going sideways, right? Another one, very simple, very hard. Again, under promise, over deliver. So be very realistic in your expectation management and then over deliver, right? Where very often we sell and then we, kind of F up. Another thing that we very often do, and we trick ourselves into doing this, is thinking that it's okay to disappoint somebody who is very happy with us or very successful with us, right? And why is that? Because we think it's going so great, this one time won't matter. Well, psychologically, it matters a lot, because a negative experience is kind of needs to be balanced back by about 9 or 10, I don't know the exact number, but ridiculous amount of positive experiences. So by being one time inconsistent, you really break things up and you make it very hard, and it takes a long time again to repair it back to the level you were, and then you have to start building again, right? So consistency is very, very important, right? Using numbers and examples, just talked about this as well, right? But just for people to understand what you're talking about, say the things in the words they understand and are theirs, and use numbers and examples to make it even more simple to understand, right? We are so much focused on just blasting our message out and not focusing enough on the way we deliver that, right? So what is it that I can use as a technique to bring it across? Is numbers, examples, right? Sometimes people even say it, right? So for example, somebody recently said about our demo or presentation, why are you not using more numbers, right? Well, that's like the most obvious thing, that we're not doing that enough, right? Why don't we say you go from X to Y in a number way of sense? Or we give more concrete examples of what happened, or concrete examples of what happens with our customers, right? Another thing, again, we're very busy people, so we are very, again, we're lazy, so all the time we have full agendas and we're not prepared, right? So we go into interactions that actually are going to make or break our success without proper preparation. That's impossible, because as we have just discussed, if you want to come across in the right way, it takes a lot of energy, a lot of preparation, etc., right? So hyper focus on those things that can make you massively more successful, and really take your time to do those things. Just let the other stuff go. Another one is something I just talked about, right, is the way you ask questions, right? So you ask an open question, you answer the question by asking a question about that answer that you got. And a very simple way to do that, if you're like unfamiliar with using that technique, is using the W words, right? So it's who, what, why, how, whatever, right? With whom. So many questions you can ask about any answer, if you remember those words for yourself. Another thing, and this again has to be is connected with. So very often what we do is we kind of sketch the dream, right? We sell something, we sell an expectation or a product or whatever it may be, right? But we do not explain people what the steps are to really get there, right? And that's hard, because if I'm going to chase anything as a human being and I don't understand what the steps are that are guaranteed to get me there, I'm risk averse, so I'm not going to do it, right? So you tell me what the steps are that I need to take, you are going to take, whatever it is, to get there, right? So if you say you're going to get more placements out of your database, you need to be able to exactly explain from this exact conversation to the exact moment that is happening, what are all the steps that I'm going to have to go through. Because then I believe in the dream and I believe that it can be achieved, and I'm much more willing to, put my money and time behind that. Another thing that is very powerful is to show other people what your relationship is with other people, or to show the people that you interact with what your relationship is with other people. So what does it mean? It means that when you interact with one person, right, there is always uncertainty within the other person about how genuine you are, right? If you can really do what you promise you can do, all those kind of things, right? There's a lot of doubt, because people are insecure and they're very often disappointed in their life and business and relationships and whatever, right? So what you can do to make this much easier is to name drop. Is the simplest thing. So name the colleagues that you talk about. Name your customers that you work with. Name them not by business name, but by their first name, right? So that already is the first level of, okay, this person is at least claiming that they are really doing this and that they have great relationships. And then the next level, obviously, is to, for example, introduce these people or involve these people, right? So that's a very good thing, because people, if I see that you can collaborate with others, in terms of your colleagues and your customers or whoever it is, then I am also much more prone to think you can probably also collaborate with me, right? Another thing, this is where we come back to the call center story. Get a lot of yeses, right? So what I would used to do, get on the phone with a person whose MOT will do within, let's say, 2 months. Would say, okay, hey, is this Katerina? They would say yes. Is it correct that this car is yours? Yes. Is it correct that this is the license plate of that car? Yes. Is it correct that your MOT is due within 2 months? Yes. You are driving this car right now, right? And you're actively using it, right? So you want the MOT to be done, right? Yes. Okay. So does it make sense to book this, let's say 1 or 2 weeks before it's really due? Yes, makes sense. Okay. Do you have your agenda in the neighborhood? Yes. Okay. What week suits you? And it's impossible for them to get suddenly get out of that giving in to me, right? So if you get a lot of yeses, then suddenly, you can kind of tackle the person with that what you actually want them to do, right?
Yes.
Another thing, remember, and this is why either having an amazing memory or having amazing admin is essential if you want to build great business relationships. For me, it's admin. I just can't remember a lot of things that are like, especially things that are very factual, etc. So I just have to write a lot of things down, put them in Salesforce, whatever it is, right? I will admit that I even do that with dating. I will write down details about the person in my notes, because I just wanna,
What kind of CRM do you use?
iPhone notes. So when you do that and when you prepare, that means the next conversation you're ready to connect whatever is happening to details you talked about in the past to core, and you can ask again about core issues or problems or whatever were asked in the past and discussed in the past as well.
You don't want to make something up.
Exactly.
He just had surgery.
Right? Okay. Another thing is how much of the time in the average interaction you have with people that you want to build a great relationship with are about you and what you want to achieve, etc., and what amount of the time is about them and what they want to achieve and what their life and personal problems and business issues and life, everything looks like, right?
100%.
Exactly. So that's an issue. So that's why I put the 90-10, because I realized that in reality this is very hard. This you will only achieve with your very best relationships, right? I can name a few people where this happens, right? So for example, Bjorn Luiters, I could sit with him on a terrace and have dinner for, you know, an hour, and for 5 minutes we would talk, oh, let's do these things, and it's all good, right? That's an easy example for me, and there are a few. So for yourself, realize that is a level where you want to get to, right? So how you do that is by forcing this to every time get further, right? So in the first conversation, some people also block your opportunity to do this. They're like, just tell me what you can do, right? Or let's just talk business, right? And that's actually because they realize that if they give in, they build a relationship, it's harder for them to reject you, so to say, right? So the better your relationship gets, the further it will get to this. And every time ask yourself, what is it that I am doing to drive this? This is obviously connected to that, right? So find out about all their preferences. What is the best time? What is the best communication channel? What kind of food do they like to eat, right? So like yesterday, I say to Lisbeth from Indeed, oh, next time we should go to this Vietnamese restaurant in Utrecht. That's because I know that she likes certain types of food, right? And is that genuine? Yes, because I actually also like that. So and that's why I remembered it, and you know, it's a good thing. But that actually, you know, creates some kind of connection. This we have also talked about. Every time you ask for an action, right? Be clear about what action you expect or ask them to execute, but also explain how this will be valuable to them. So use the incentives. Another one is to ask people to help you directly actually is a way to get them to help you directly. So to give you a very simple example, let's say you are talking with your largest prospect, right? It's the digital, let's say it's the head of digital of Manpower Global, right? We want this guy to sign a deal global for our DMP, right? A way to get him to do that is actually to say, do you want to speak at our conference, right? Or do you want to do a video with us about your digital strategy globally, right? So by asking people to help you indirectly, because that is going to help your business, and they understand that, right? Right? If they speak at your conference or make a video for you with your brand on it, that's going to help us, right? But that actually makes a person invested. And when they're invested, they want a return, and thus they're going to invest more, right? So asking people to help you in other ways than, let's say, directly, is going to help you do them what you really want them to do long term. Use your own words, we've discussed that. This one also very much so how often do you tell a person what you found really great about a conversation or something they did or their follow-up or their results or whatever, right? Almost never. I do it too little here even internally, so let alone with our vendors or our customers or whatever, right? So it's so simple word is obviously compliments, right? So complimenting people is such an amazing way to drive behavior, right? So to have people hungry to do more of that, right? It's like, you know, they know if I show the right behavior, I get a compliment. I'm going to show more behavior, get more compliments, and you know, you keep going. You're in the right flow. Also talk not just about don't recognize their right behavior, but also tell then how it makes you feel, because that makes it much more powerful, emotional, intimate, etc. Right? So it's so great to have that you did that, and it makes me feel so happy because and then use contrasts. Other people don't really do this, right? So you make them really stand out. It's personal. Very important thing that everybody has to do in business is disagreeing, right? We cannot always agree with our vendors, our partners, our colleagues, our managers, our customers, our potential customers, right? Sometimes we have to simply say, this is the way we're going to do this, right? So that means that you need to have a technique to do that. And the easiest one is to take a deep breath in and say the first name of the other person, right? And then you say, I understand that it would be great if, and because of, right? But the fact remains that we do this for this reason, right? So to give you let's think of an example. Give you an example, Nyla. So, for example, I could say, Nyla, I understand it would be great if you would serve you chicken, baked chicken to be specifically, for breakfast and for lunch and for dinner every day, right? It would make you feel very happy, nourished and all that. But the fact remains that we are a business, right? And that we want people to have a private life. And for that reason, we're just going to keep it to lunch.
But that's going to be tricky.
Right. Right? So that is the way to acknowledge the other person's feelings and reasons for wanting something else than we are simply deciding, but we give the core reason for not doing that. And that's the end of the discussion. Connected to that is doing this or doing this, which is very powerful, right? So when you ask a person like, do you have any questions, right? They're not going to give you any questions, right? So if you don't want questions, you can do that, right? But if you say, do you have any questions? Then they feel much more openness and opportunity to ask their questions. And if you deliver a message, this is the way we're going to do it. You don't do this, but you do it like this, right? So opening and closing your hands, very powerful thing. Most people don't know this technique, so it's very easy to use. It feels very natural as well to do, and you actually feel more sure about it yourself as well. Using the power of 3, so every time you have a major meeting or want to bring across a powerful message, you need to have 3 core points that you're going to deliver, right? So, and this is something I have to get used to as well, because I always have a lot of points and a lot of things I want to talk about, but you have to, you have a major thing that you want to bring across, then that you have 3 key points that kind of explain that, and then you close again, right? So if you want to bring across a powerful message, and it's actually fun to do an exercise with yourself where you think about a situation where somebody brings across 2 points or somebody brings across 4 points, actually 3 feels best. And there's been a lot of research on this. 3 is the most powerful number so that's why they call it the power of 3.
Why you also have to use etc. To
Exactly.
Also, why the articles in our blog has been 3 ways
Yep.
to get value. 3 ways.
Then admit your mistakes and imperfections, right? So this is again connected to vulnerability, right? If you can do that, then the other person is also going to do it. Especially in a business relationship, we're always kind of competing with each other or trying, so if you open up and you show that you're really in it to win it together, right? And that you are making mistakes and you're happy to talk about them, that you are not perfect, then the other person is going to admit that as well. And you're going to have a much more constructive relationship that is driving things forward. So again, constant evaluation is key, right? So try for yourself to recognize, and you've already made a list of things that you think can help you. So try to evaluate your current behavior and results and decide what behavior you're going to use next time and try to execute on that, of course, to achieve your desired results. So what is the time?
Time is 5 minutes.
Almost 2. Okay, so what I'm going to ask you all to do, and we can do that after the class, is rate the items that you have listed on a scale of 1 to 10, just for yourself as an easy way to prioritize them, so to say, right? So the scale of 10 should be in terms of impact they could have on your success. And then the next thing I'm going to ask you to do is to share your items in a Excel that I will share in OneDrive, right? So you can put your name down here, and then for each month you're going to list your item, right, for the next 6 to 12 months, so to say. I don't know how many items you wrote up, but it should be at least 6, I imagine. Then you're going to say in which category they are. Then you describe every month, so you don't do this right now, but every month at the beginning of the month you say, this is my initial situation, right, in relationship to what I want to improve. Then at the end of the month you describe what behavior you actually showed. So what action did you undertake to improve it, and then describe what that resulted in, right? So what were the tangible results, or what did you observe in terms of different behavior from business relationships that you are trying to build, and how did that make you feel? And then of course you can add, okay, these are the things I'm going to keep doing in the future, keep learning in the future, to really, you know, make this my own and make this a tool that I can just use without even thinking about it, right?
Should we clap first?
Thank you. And thank you all for participating and sharing. That made me very happy. My hope, obviously, is that you're more motivated to improve your business relationship, that you have some ways to evaluate your business relationships, to evaluate why you do what you do, and you have some concrete tools to improve your relationship. I'm open to your feedback and any questions you may have.